the Ben Motorcycle Adventures podcast, your hub for everything off-road, dual sport, and adventure motorcycle. My name is John. I will be your host. This is episode number 23, Ben Motorcycle Adventures podcast. Thank you for joining, and as always, thank you for listening. Again, episode number 23, and we've got some late-breaking news today. I believe it was just announced today. Today's the 11th, right? Need to take a look at my phone. 16th annual KTM Adventure Rider Rally, September 13th through the 15th, 2019. This event provides riders of all skill levels an opportunity to ride with and learn from adventurers all over the world. Looks like cost is going to be $250 for, I guess, what I would call general admission. There's a couple other options here. Let me click on that. So yeah, for pre-registration, if you will, $250. This year, KTM is offering a one-night camp out. So basically, you ride with a group, you camp somewhere overnight, you come back to the hostel, if you will, on Saturday. So that option is actually $350. And again, that's if you want to ride out one night and camp with the group. There's also the Ultimate Race qualifier registration. Not for me, but I think KTM, they have that Ultimate Race qualifier. You know, people ride heads up or do like a rally style competition on their ADV bikes, and it's either first and second get to go to or represent KTM in some rally. So those are your options. $250 for your general registration. $350 if you want to do the camp out, and then it's another $50 if you want to participate in the Ultimate Race. So again, September 13th through the 15th, we have already made our reservations. Everything is taken care of. We'll be there September 11th through the 16th. I don't know where we're going to stop, what we're going to do along the way. Am contemplating the Utah Backcountry Discovery Route on the way home. But again, 16th annual KTM Adventure Rider Rally coming at you this September. Just announced, and you can actually buy tickets for it on eventbrite.com, and I just noticed a blog post on ktm.com. Need to rewind here for a second. Last episode, we talked a lot about KTM's new 790 Adventure R. It's supposed to be hitting the States here in, April, May, June, who knows when. But I did see that somebody took delivery of one in Czechoslovakia. You can look on YouTube and search around for the KTM 790 and see somebody who's got one in their garage. But yeah, I got some feedback about that particular podcast. Here's one comment. Everyone needs to be honest with themselves about what they want in a bike. He says, my measurements weren't geared towards what he wants. A couple of things that he notes: cost, being able to touch the ground and pick the bike up. Those are some of the factors that he weighs. Another gentleman who's actually going to buy a KTM 1290 says that he rides more, paved road, cobblestone, stuff like that, as opposed to dirt. So the 1290 is a better fit. And yeah, again, I think where you ride, what you do, should totally influence the bike that you buy. I mean, in that sense, when you start to consider all the factors, 15 to 20 factors, the things that matter to you and what you need out of your bike, yeah, I think there really is a bike that's pretty close for everybody. And one of these gentlemen, one does have his money down on a 790, and again, the other one, London Street Rider, he's actually got his money down on the new 1290. So again, a lot of things influence what bike you buy. I don't really necessarily think from your major manufacturers there's any one bike that's bad or any bike that's right and wrong. You just have to figure out which bike that is for you. I had another question coming in this week from Franziska regarding the SoCal BDR. Now, the SoCal BDR, the California BDR South, whatever you want to call it, was actually slotted to come out on January 1st. I believe they released the tracks early on the website because people wanted to ride it over the break, and my intention was to ride it the first week of January. Obviously, that didn't pan out for me, but yeah, I've got the map. I've done my homework to a pretty great extent, and yeah, I don't have that listed as a trip or a tour on the website yet. I haven't got around to it, and I've been really busy, so I apologize. But what I'm thinking right now is, on a previous podcast, we talked about going to the Wilseyville Hare Scramble and then follow that up with the LA Barstow to Vegas ride. I thought that maybe after LA Barstow to Vegas, we could try to squeeze in the SoCal Backcountry Discovery Route. So if you're interested in that, shoot me an email. I will go ahead and put the tour on the site after I do a little bit more homework. I believe we can get through the route, barring some crazy weather in the early portion of December. The route is really meant to be ridden year round, but we've had some weird weather this year. So yeah, tentatively planning early December on the SoCal BDR for those of you who might be wondering. And you know what? Thank you for the question. All right, let's dig into tonight's episode. Now, our guest Drew, our friend Drew, he has ridden the Arizona Backcountry Discovery Route extensively, north to south, south to north, Colorado BDR, New Mexico BDR, you name it. He's been all over the place. So he came on the show, and actually we recorded this interview in early December, but he came on the show to kind of walk us through what to expect on the Arizona BDR. And I think a lot of it is what you wouldn't expect. There's a lot of terrain and elevation that, again, at least for me, when I think of Arizona, that's not really what I might anticipate. So this is a great podcast to kind of learn more about that route, learn more about New Mexico, a little bit of Colorado, his take on Colorado. So again, Drew, I apologize for not getting this podcast out a couple months earlier, but you know what? Here we are, middle of February. You're really a couple months away from being able to ride the Arizona BDR route. So this information right now is very relevant. So Drew, thank you for sharing with us. Ben Motorcycle Adventures Podcast, episode number 23. Let's talk the Arizona Backcountry Discovery Route. All right, guys, welcome back. Another episode of the podcast. Tonight, we're going to talk about the Arizona Backcountry Discovery Route with our friend Drew. Drew, thanks for coming on and sharing your stories with us.
Yep, no worries, mate.
So, for those of us who don't know, a little brief overview of the route. It's about 750, 850 miles north to south, south to north, however you slice it. And it cuts through a lot of the, the most scenic parts of Arizona. You rode it. For starters, what did you ride on this route?
I actually rode a few different bikes on it. I've been on the AZ BDR a number of times. So primarily an Africa Twin. I enjoy it. I actually had I've done a lot of the route on actually an RD07 original Africa Twin, and then I also have one of the new Africa Twins now as well. So I've done it both with old and new.
Okay. Now, have you primarily done the route north to south or south to north?
I've done the entire route. When they first put it out, we actually rode it from north to south. We went up and did the Colorado BDR and then came down and did the route from north to south with about, I think we had like 8, maybe 10 of us.
Oh, wow. Good group.
Yep. And then I live in Arizona, and I've done a lot of the southern section multiple times and a lot of the mid section multiple times. And I've only done the northern section a couple of times.
Okay. Now, obviously, the tracks and everything like that, maps are readily available online. How did you choose to navigate the route, at least the first time?
We just downloaded the GPS tracks from the BDR website.
Okay. As far as accommodations along the way, do you prefer to camp, or have you camped along the route, or do you utilize hotels and motels?
I've done both. Done a lot of camping, and the route, when we did it with the large group, we hoteled it in Flagstaff the first night, and then we camped down out of Globe.
Okay. What time of year, in your opinion, do you think would be best? I know that at least if we kind of thumb through things on the Arizona BDR website, talks about monsoon seasons, and obviously at some point along in the year, snow is going to be a factor. So again, in your opinion, what do you think would be the preferable time to ride this route?
Definitely fall. Spring, one of the most scenic areas on the route is up along what is called the Rim above Payson, and that area gets shut down for the winter. So the most well-known road is the 300 road that runs across the top of the Rim, which the route takes for quite a ways. And as soon as it gets wet, they close that down, and then in spring it can open as late as April. Oh, wow. Okay. So, for anybody that's going to do it, they need to make sure that area was open. And then a tremendous amount of Arizona's the really brutal red clay. So if you ride it during monsoons and you get some of the big storms, you're going to get into some bike swallowing mud, and it's not the regular mud. It's, like pottery clay, bog your bike down, you're in trouble type mud. I've burnt a few clutches up.
Yeah, I think we've all seen those photos of the bikes, caked with mud and clay between the fender and the tire. That doesn't really look like a good time. So, okay.
They for us, when we did it in September. It was probably around the 25th or something like that, and that was pretty good timing. The weather wasn't too bad, and you can the temperatures will be fine, all the way throughout the state. That's the hardest part for a lot of people. If they come down in summer, then the southern portion is going to be extremely brutal, and then in spring it can still be really cold up in the Flagstaff areas, that kind of stuff. It's a pretty diverse route in terms of temperature, because you could literally at the right time of year, you could literally be 115 in the desert areas, and the next day have snow up in the Flagstaff type range. So it's definitely got to pick your time well.
Yeah, quite a range in elevation along the route. That actually surprised me as I started to look into this and kind of plot my ride for 2019. I was actually surprised. I think there's a point there that might even be around 11,000 feet. So,
yep,
not what, generally speaking, not what a lot of us think when we think about Arizona. But yeah, I mean, that's what Backcountry Discovery is about, diverse routes.
Yeah, and I would say that the route's primarily in the cooler area of Arizona. The southern route's definitely going to be hot, but once you get to Globe and you go from even over Pioneer Pass there above Globe, the temperatures are going to be cool. That elevation up there is quite high. But yeah, once you come up past kind of Benson and you start heading north from Benson, you don't have too long a riding before you're going to start to gain an elevation, and then you just stay up in elevation the whole time.
So speaking of the southern portion, I've done some reading. Some people might be concerned about the sand down there in the southern portions of the ride. Is it really that bad?
No. There was really only one very small area that the trail was a little sandy. Most of the people I think that I've seen that have kind of gotten to the sand, it's like a typical of a lot of the two tracks down here. If you try to cross over from one side, one track to the other, or you get off to the edges in some of the soft parts, it can get deep, but there's no long sandy runs on the route.
Okay. Good to know. As far as the route goes, you've obviously been on it a number of times, so I would think you'd have a pretty good idea. What's your favorite section or really favorite point of interest as far as this route's concerned?
I think the most spectacular section really is from the ride over Globe, when you come out of Mammoth and you head up over the Pioneer Pass and into Globe. And then for the ones that choose to do the Cherry Creek route, or if they bypass it and take the road straight to Young, and then up around the 300 road and up to Flagstaff, that's what makes this whole route. The southern route, while it's pretty flat land and it's sandy and you can get down along the border, and there's some cool stuff to see, but I wouldn't say that's a spectacular, scenery. Whereas that route, like I said, from pretty much heading over Pioneer Pass all the way up until you get to Flagstaff is, it's pretty mind-boggling. It's awesome.
So yeah, pretty typical of the BDRs. Not everything's going to be epic, but you're going to ride through some of that stuff for pay dirt. So another good point to know. Just considering first timers, or maybe even reflecting on your first ride on the Arizona BDR, what are some things maybe you wish you would have known, or something again for someone like me who's going to go for their first time?
One of the things that I didn't know was when they first put the BDR out, they, in the northern section where you go across the Indian reservation, they put out that you had to go into Cameron to the trading post and get your permits to be out in that area. In
the Navajo area? I
believe so. I think it's in that area, but that's actually only if you plan on camping out there.
Oh, okay.
If you're that whole section, I would say, well, it's kind of like high desert mesa, so the riding's fun. There's good 2-track and it's kind of fast, and you kind of scoot along, but there's not a huge amount of great scenery out there. When we started and we left from Lee's Ferry up there, and then you head down, and we'd had one of the guys had gone up and got passes for us all. But the reality is, unless you're planning on camping out there, you can drive those roads and those 2-tracks without having to go get the permit. And where Cameron sits isn't really on the route, so it's a bit of a pain. So I would recommend, unless you're planning on camping on the reservation, you don't need the pass, I don't believe.
Okay, again, that's a good tip, because I believe I was looking at the site here. I think it still says that you're going to need that permit. So again, me, for instance, I don't plan on camping, so I'm not going to bother there. Good to know.
Yeah, and like I said, it's only the fact that Cameron's not too far off the BDR, but it's kind of a pain to get it. And a lot of people, of course, when we got them, somebody had passed through there weeks before, and they stopped and bought the permits, because starting at the northern end, Cameron's down the bottom end of the reservation area. So a lot of people, when they come up, if they do the route the way they planned it, which I think most of those, and I could be wrong, that the BDRs are really planned by them to go from south to north.
Yes, that's the way I understand it too.
Yeah. So you're actually on the Indian reservation for a while, and you come out on the highway, and then you have to run down the highway to get to Cameron to get your pass. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, to be out there doing it.
For sure.
And then probably the next thing I would say is to kind of know your ability from doing a lot of the BDRs. I know some of the sections that run up what's called Cherry Creek. If people are doing those on loaded big bikes, if they're not really good riders or got some help to get through a few areas, they're going to struggle. So I know quite a few guys that have tore their bikes up, and then have said, "Oh, everybody said this was easy," and got their bikes beat up. So
is that a technically rocky section, or we got a lot of elevation in there, or is it sand, or what are we looking at?
Actually, it's mostly rock.
Okay.
Kind of, some sections are a little bit of loose, rubbly kind of rock, and the weather here, most people don't understand that when the monsoons hit, this state kind of flash floods everywhere. So those trails, sometimes they can be impassable to everybody. They can have huge, 8 and 10 foot straight vertical drops where the water's come down through one of the valleys and just taken the trail out.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
And so there was some good pictures posted up on Adventure Rider from groups that went through there. Hey, we got to here, and we were just, we had to turn around and go back. And those are good riders. It's just not probable to take those big bikes, straight down those kind of drops. But
sure.
That'd be the thing that I would tell most people if they're going to travel on the BDR. They should really plan what time of year they're going to do it, and then really take a good look at the different routes, and then watch the weather. Watch when recently when monsoons have hit, because it changes the route tremendously, especially up around Flagstaff. When you go from Young through 300 Road and up around Flagstaff, there's some areas in there where you get out in a little bit of remote stuff, and there's some good gravel roads that in an instant turn into the red clay and the hard packed rock. And there's some long rocky sections up there, but the weather can play havoc on those big time. Now,
you're obviously not a native to Arizona, but I just want to pull back to that southern part of the region again. Is there anything you think that we should do differently or prepare for when we're down there in that dry desert?
Well, like anything in the desert down here, you want to make sure you got plenty of water with you. That's for sure. I know of some groups that have gone down there thinking, "Oh, it won't be too bad, and we won't be down there too long." That have run into some of the sand, or run into, just some troubles with a bike maybe, and then, got stuck out there in the heat. But the southern section's definitely not overly hard. And there is a section, I haven't looked recently, but I know that there was a reroute around some private property.
Okay.
So they need to take a look at that when you get around Sonoyta. We did the original route, and I've been down in that area, and we ride some trails that are a little bit rougher than the paths they took through to Benson, but there's a maze of trails down there, so it's easy to get turned around and lost.
Okay.
So explain that.
Looking on the website, I don't know if this is the reroute you're speaking of, but it says Section 1 has a reroute through Empire Ranch.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So they've updated that and adjusted the tracks accordingly, so that's good to know. For you, your time on the Arizona BDR, any adversity? Did you face any, or was it pretty much a seamless ride?
Well, I know when you travel with a large group, you always run into flats and things like that. We got caught in a huge monsoon storm down at Globe, and one of the times that we've done it, we got down to Globe, and the rain was. I think we had like 3 or 4 inches in like 30 minutes or something like that.
Oh, and can't imagine.
So that was we were on our way, kind of heading south, and everybody was kind of like, "Yeah, let's head back to Phoenix." So that came down pretty hard. But no, most of the time, like I said, anything that we run across is usually from Mother Nature. Like I said, some of the storms or some of the flash floods that have changed some of the trails. Some spots we might have to go around. Haven't really had any mechanical difficulties other than a few flats, and that's something that people need to be prepared for. I don't think people realize how rocky Arizona is. And if you're doing all the A sections, particularly, you're gonna battle quite a bit of rock and some rock ledges and things like that. And for most of us, if they're running tubes on the big bikes, that kind of stuff, getting pinch flats is pretty quick and easy to happen.
Okay, yeah. Guilty as charged. Again, haven't done much riding in Arizona, and generally speaking, I would assume there'd be more sand than gnarly rock. So that's good to know too. No,
yeah, it's very rocky. Most of the stuff here that we ride everywhere, we ride small bikes and whatnot. I would say it's, for the riding we do, I would say, well, if you're going to run into anything, it's going to be 90% rock. Most of the sand stuff that people think of, definitely down more on the southwest and Barrywater Gold, the bombing range and things like that around Yuma. I mean, places like that are full of sand, but most of the route on the BDR is people are going to battle rock more than anything.
Okay. So again, you're not a native to Arizona. Are you from Australia?
Yeah, I am. Yep.
So have you done a fair amount of riding in Australia too?
Yeah, been riding since I was a kid. So got a few miles logged in both countries for sure.
So how does it differ in Australia versus riding in the States, if at all?
I would say the riding here is way more diverse and there's a lot more of it. Australia, you got about 80% of the country that's pretty much uninhabitable desert. So we tend to ride more around the coast, and we don't have very high elevations.
Okay.
Whereas over here, we don't have things like doing the Colorado BDR or riding the Rockies or the Blue Ridge Mountain Range over on the East Coast. I mean, I've been fortunate to ride a lot around the country here, and the diversity here is unbelievable.
Okay, great. Now, we had a guest on a few weeks ago. He talked a little bit about Colorado. He really raved about Utah, but what are your thoughts on the Colorado route?
I lived in Durango, Colorado for about 4.5 years. So the Colorado route from the BDR standpoint, it's pretty spectacular, but I would say you're in and out of the Rockies way too quick.
Really?
So
okay.
There's so much more for somebody that's going up there. The BDR is a great route, but most of them obviously are just designed to go from south to north. The riding, once you kind of get out of the mountain areas and you start heading north, it's not really exciting heading north on the Colorado BDR. But the when you get in around Silverton and Ouray and over to Lake City and all those kind of places, I mean, you could spend, we spend about a week there every year just riding all the passes in that area.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I don't want to knock the Backcountry Discovery Route people. Obviously, they've done a ton of legwork and they have some awesome places, just mapped out, plug and play for us to ride. But I feel like the Oregon Backcountry Discovery Route is also like that. Unless you kind of take your own liberties, it kind of steers around from the the Cascade Range here, and a lot a lot of otherwise would be highlights. So good to know if you're going to go ride Colorado, maybe give yourself some more time to kind of explore that area a little bit.
I would, for if I spending time there, really kind of makes the trip, and I like the BDRs, and I've had quite a few people. I lead a few group rides and stuff like that every now and again around here, and we've done a lot of riding extensively down in the southern part of Arizona, and so a lot of the guys are like, oh man, you should put together a route. You go, and I'm like, well, that also depends on rider level and stuff like that too.
Sure.
I think they do such a good job of saying, look, we're going to take you through the state, and we're going to try to hit as many highlights as we can, taking you through the state. And friend and I did the New Mexico BDR, which is I think the longest one. It's about 1,100 and some odd miles.
Yeah, it's right there with Idaho for length.
Yeah, and I lived, like I said, I lived in Durango, but I was also in Farmington, New Mexico for about 7 years, and so we actually just ran that in 2.5 days. We headed down to Del City and ran that in 2.5 days because I thought it was just going to be what I knew in New Mexico, having lived there. I was like, oh, it's going to be boring and flat and horrible. And then doing their route, there was places I never even knew of, elevations and stuff like that. I was like, man, this is awesome. We're going to come back and explore, like in Chloride Canyon and some of those kind of places. So I think anybody who rides big bikes knows that sometimes you got to work the longer, boring parts to get to the exciting parts. So the way they've done them, they're taking that into consideration.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Routes that, I think people with a reasonable set of skills and a motorcycle endorsement and a worthy machine can ride. So that's a good point too. And that's really what it's all about, getting as many people out there as we can. You piqued my interest there. New Mexico, I'm kind of tentatively planning on riding that route in May. What can you tell me about that since you're right here on the phone?
I think most people take about a week or so to do that because it's a pretty long route.
Yeah.
Same thing for me there. When you leave out of Del City and you go up on the mesa there, that's pretty spectacular. And same thing there. You really got to pick when you're going to ride that too, because when you get up to Antonito and you get to the end of it, that can be snow hammered for quite a number of months. And then when you come out of Del City, you ride out of El Paso, Texas, and head out toward Del City. That can be flaming hot.
Yeah.
That's another one that you got to pick the right time of year, and mud, same thing. They get that gray clay mud when you go out across a lot of the reservation, and you go through like Tuba City. Man, that stuff, you get stuck out there, and people may never find you.
You just leave the bike out there and walk home. Huh?
Just give up. And just walk out. The clay builds up on your boots, but. Like I said, we ran it hard and fast because we were, we went to do some of the Colorado BDR with some friends. Again, we did that in September, which was a pretty good time frame to do that one. But there's a lot. I would say there's a lot more to see and a lot of diverse country on the New Mexico one, given the additional miles. Arizona, I'd have no qualms in running Arizona in a couple of days from like south to north or either way if you're just going to ride it hard. And there's not a massive amount to see on the southern and the northern ends of Arizona, whereas New Mexico's a lot more diverse and spread out. And you're going to deal with a lot of different stuff out there.
Yeah, so, see, that's interesting. Obviously, I've researched the route, Google it, done everything I can to find out some information. And kind of my interpretation of it is it's kind of an overlooked route. Obviously I haven't been on it, but just looking at some of the photos, reading about some of the, the points of interest and everything, it's not a BDR that gets a ton of publicity, but I think there's a lot to see, like you said, along the route.
Oh man, there's a ton to see along that route. You can go past the White Sands Missile Range and when you get into Truth or Consequences and there's some beautiful lakes and stuff there. We just camped a couple of nights on it. So we camped one night there. And then I'm trying to think, we camped maybe up around Gallup or Grants, whichever one it goes through. I think it goes through Gallup. But it's super diverse, and there's a lot of. I think it's a little bit trickier to navigate. There's a few spots as you go up through the middle section that We ran into some private property gates that we had to kind of route around and catch a road on the other side.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's seasonal closures or what it was, but there was a few times where it wasn't super straightforward doing that route.
Okay.
But I would say it's not I think if I remember right, there's 2 sections that, if you're not handy on a big bike, you might struggle on. And one would be through Chloride Canyon. And it's not too bad. There's just a little bit of a tricky hill as you climb out. And then they have 1A section that they have that takes you up a beautiful area that overlooks. I'm trying to think of the name of the town before you get in there, but it specifies that it's probably it's a bit of a tough route. If you're on a loaded big bike, it's a pretty rocky, climb for a while and then drops down the other side. The rest of it's all pretty easy. It's just a lot of miles. So a lot of the people, it depends on whether you like to bust out 300 to 400 mile days or not.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you guys covered that in a couple days, you must have been riding after dark a little bit at least, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, got lights on and helmet lights and that kind of stuff. So we you guys are experiences. You have to be careful up there with the reservation. And we went through it on a weekend, and we found one gentleman in a 4-door Ford pickup that was off in a creek bed that he'd had a little too much to drink and run off the road. And as we were heading into the town, we had the headsets on the bikes talking to one another, and it's amazing how those headlights just head right for you when they're not too aware of where they're going. So
yeah,
on that one.
Yeah, we just recorded a podcast with somebody that talked about he loves to utilize the Sena Bluetooth headsets. What are you using?
We use the Scalar, the Pack Talk.
Okay.
So I've been using those since they, from way back when they started with their, G4s and 9s and Xs and into the Pack Talk stuff. And their dynamic mesh network that they have where you just, you can just ride off and come back and they all sync up and that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it kind of adds another element to the ride. You're able to communicate with your buddies. And one thing our other guests kind of preach is a little bit of safety to the ride if something happens, or the likelihood of getting separated is a lot less. So I'm definitely going to dig into that a little bit more as we move forward. It's
definitely worth it. If you're looking to try some of them, let me know. I've got a good friend who's involved with the Tucker Rocker Company and might be able to help you out with some headsets.
Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely reach out to you.
We've been using them for a lot of years, and we use them, like I said, we do a lot of, the kind of extreme endurocross type of riding off-road here. And, man, it's sure nice when you can just talk to one another and tell people, hey, when you come up, stay to the left or stay to the right. And that constant communication makes travel a lot quicker. You're not stopping to, ask questions, that kind of stuff. So I don't ride without them anymore.
Yeah, people take that for granted, the stopping and chatting for a second or waiting for people or making sure they see which way to go. All that adds up over the course of a day, especially if you're going to ride 1,100 miles in 2 days. So really cool.
Well, yep. And we just, we did it with 2 of us and headsets on, and, we're never more than probably, 30, 40 feet apart. And we were scooting scooting down some of those roads, maybe a little faster than the speed limits might say you should go.
We won't tell anybody. It's funny how that happens when you get out there in the middle of nowhere and you're just like, you know what? We're just going to open her up. A lot of times you look at the asphalt and you're like, yeah, I'm looking to make up time here.
Yep.
Just kind of is what it is.
Yep. One thing about the Arizona BDR, I would say, though, is there's very, very little blacktop.
Really?
Yep. You're, when you start down south there at like Sierra Vista and then you head up kind of over the pass, I mean, once you kind of get in the dirt, there's not very many miles on that route that I would say is blacktop. Most of it's dirt for sure. I suppose I rode Idaho this year. I suppose if there was one way to knock that route, it would be some of the asphalt. I mean, it was a great route. I had a gre's ride, but there's a one section that's pretty significant from Darby, Montana back to Lolo. There's a pretty good stretch that brings you into Elk City. So, I'm one of those people. I want to get out there on the dirt. I don't mind burning out 5-10 miles on slab here and there, but not really a fan of the long sections of it. So good to know. Yep. And that's, like I said, there's very little of it. And there's, for a lot of people, if they've never ridden, like one of the areas up around Flagstaff actually takes you through the volcanic area. So you ride in the cinders.
Okay.
And if you haven't ridden in that before, that's a whole different type of sand to ride in. It's pretty cool. And of course it's black. And it's fun. And you can, same thing there, if you want to look around in some of these areas. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of history in this state. So for people who like old ghost towns or histories, and of course, you got Wide Earp, and the route doesn't take you through Tombstone, or some of those kind of places. So if they're making the effort to come and they really want to see some of the stuff, I would say you got to get a little bit off the BDR to go and see some of the real cool stuff.
That's funny. I just watched Wyatt Earp on Monday.
Yep.
Yeah. But no, back to your point here where we live in Bend, Oregon, kind of the same thing. We're in a volcanic area. There's a lot of cinder around here, a lot of lava rock, but there's also this really unique, deep, black volcanic sand. And there's a place where you can go ride through it. There's actually a riding area with trails and things like that. So one of those unique things we have here, I didn't really anticipate that there were too many places in the world that had that kind of sand. So that's cool.
Yeah. Yep. It's pretty cool. Like I said, you're going to run into some different soils and different terrains. That's for sure.
All right. Have you been on any other routes by chance? Have you been on the Continental Divide?
I've done some of the Continental Divide, but that's one of the rides that wouldn't, where a few of us have looked at doing from, like the complete route.
Mm-hmm.
Done little pieces of the Trans-American Trail. I've ridden from coast to coast a few times, different types of bikes.
Wow.
Been up in the Blue Ridge, done Tail of the Dragon and, things like that.
Okay.
Done some riding up in the Northwest and Montana, Yellowstone, those kind of areas. But in terms of like the routes, I typically kind of, usually with somebody, and we kind of figure out different things that we want to go see.
Sure.
A bit more of a, I really enjoy the historical side of things and some of the old towns. So we usually are trying to go see things like that when we can.
Yeah, and a lot of times you got to, like you said, get off the beaten path to find some of that stuff, but totally worth it.
Yep.
And the Continental Divide, that's something I'm looking at. I would love to do that this year. I've kind of known about it for a while. Obviously, in the back of my mind, it's been around, but just an intriguing ride, Mexico to Canada. I even had somebody pitch the idea of Guatemala to the North Pole, which would be amazing, but we'll see how that rolls out. But yeah.
Continental Divide, we've last couple of years we've had a group of us that have been planning on. I've got a couple of friends that have ridden most of it. That's a tough one to find a time frame to do. It really is, because the diversity of heat down south and the cold up north.
Yeah.
You kind of have to watch. If it's a big snow year up north, then there's some parts that you'll just never get through. So there's some good figuring to do if you're going to do the Continental Divide.
Yeah, that's going to be, again, riding through a state's one thing. Trying to balance that act through 5 different states, a whole nother thing. And then again, when this gentleman's talking about riding from Guatemala to the North Pole, no way around it. You're going to get into some gnarly weather, the whole 9 yards. It's part of the experience. It would be really cool. But yeah, you're right. Maybe the best bet's to ride north to south, just kind of beat out the snows and work your way down through. I'm not sure, but we'll take a closer look at it.
Yep. Then you got to figure out how you're going to get to the start and how you're going to get back. So
that's the type of stuff I worry about after the fact. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's part of the stuff that, like, some of the BDRs that we've done. That's part of the looking at, like, well, where are we going to pick it up and which way are we going to run? And then, what do we do when we come, what do we do when we get to the end of it? So, I'm going to try. I know the California one's just about, I think it just came out, right?
Yeah. So they put the tracks out, I think 2 days ago.
Yeah, and so that's one that it's the southern part, but for us that's not too far away. We can kind of run down to the border and pick that up, and then do that and kind of come back over to Arizona. But that's probably the next one that I'll head over to just to see what that route looks like, and that looks like a good one. Yeah,
and you can probably make a nice loop out of that. Like you said, I expect that route's going to get plenty of traffic here in the next few weeks. They actually put the tracks out early because I think so many people are bothering them about it. But that's cool. A winter route. I think That's something that a lot of people like me are looking for that don't have the time to do a ton of research, to go put a loop together either.
Well, and I respond to a lot of people on Adventure Rider who are, I follow the different BDR threads, and it's amazing how many people are like, oh, I'm going to come do the Arizona BDR this winter, and it's like, no, you're not. You can't get through, big section. One of the biggest sections you want to ride is closed down in the wintertime, and it's closed for snow. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, I know you think Arizona's nothing but a freaking oven, but that's such a small part of the state. The rest of the state's so elevated and cold. It's you got to find a window to do it for sure.
Yeah, and you're right. I was just scrolling through Adventure Rider before I got on here with you, and I was looking at the New Mexico thread, and somebody, a few days ago was talking about, or maybe it was a week ago, was talking about riding through there now. And I don't know enough about New Mexico to know otherwise, but I've spent a fair amount of time staring at the map, and I'm thinking, no way, man, you're not riding through there.
No, this, if they're doing it this time of year, they'd have to be unbelievably lucky where it was kind of windy and cold and dried out some of the areas to be able to get through there. Like I said, especially across the reservation areas in the central, if it rains for an hour, you're not getting through there.
You're done, huh?
You're done.
That's crazy. We don't have that kind of mud. We don't have that kind of mud in Oregon. That's crazy.
Yeah, there's some pretty. Like I said, to me, it's just like pottery clay, and it's not that you can't move. It's just that the wheels pack up, and I'll run high fenders on bikes and stuff like that. It makes no difference. It'll block up. Like I said, I've sat out there, burnt up clutches, and calling for help.
Well, yeah. I mean, eventually you end up with 200 pounds of mud caked on your bike either way, right? And
Yep.
it's getting hot. You're moving slow, so yeah. Timing's going to be everything on a lot of these routes. So again,
Yep.
I think that's obviously not everyone's heeded the advice. You just need to go to Adventure Rider and check that out. But definitely something not to take for granted. You got to catch, roughly the right window. Maybe it's a little bit hot in the south, but it's perfect up high. Something like that. You got to strike a balance. So.
Yep. Yeah, that's why I kind of like the fall, because you'll know if there's any snow still left up north or if it's gone. And really on the BDR, I'd say that up above Payson along the rim and then up around Flagstaff, the only two places you can get snow, and neither of them are what I would say peak areas. So it's easy to know if the trails are going to be not have snow, but rain's a big factor, and especially up north. I mean, Flagstaff can get rain every afternoon.
Huh. Again, yeah, wouldn't anticipate that. That's cool.
Yep. So.
All right, I think I'm going to go ahead and let you go. I really appreciate you donating your time and kind of educating us about a couple of these backcountry discovery routes in the Southwest. Always love to hear from people with experience on the routes. Is there anything you want to add before you go?
No, just get out there and ride.
We will definitely do that, Drew. Thank you for coming on the podcast and educating us about the Arizona Backcountry Discovery Route. And we got a little bit of bonus footage there. New Mexico, Colorado. Always love to hear about everyone's experience on these routes. And hopefully that helps you guys if you're planning to ride through Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, whatever the case may be. I think this information will be really helpful. And we'll continue to try to bring more people on the podcast that have been on some of these rides or routes so they can share their experiences with you. Same can be said for the SoCal BDR. I'm hoping to get a hold of somebody who's ridden the route. I've identified a few people, if you will. I've stalked them on Facebook. Not really, but yeah, there's a few people who've been on the SoCal BDR, and I think we would love to hear from them. BenMotorcycleAdventures.com. That is our website. Click the About section, jump into our blog, catch up on the written content, and every previous episode of this podcast is available there also. BenMotorcycleAdventures.com. Off-road, dual sport, and ADV motorcycle tours all over the West Coast. Based here in Bend, Oregon. Adventure, dual sport, off-road riding. One of the best places, I think, in the lower 48 just to ride a motorcycle in general. So if you're interested in hooking up with us for a tour in Oregon or on one of these backcountry discovery routes, anything like that, BenMotorcycleAdventures.com. We'd be more than happy to take care of you. Next episode of the podcast, Ben Motorcycle Adventures episode number 24. I'm not sure who our guest will be just yet. I've reached out to a number of people. I've been working on some things with a number of people. I know that Keith is back from Mexico. He's interested in recapping his adventure. I'm in the works with a professional photographer, videographer to help answer some of your your questions, my questions about getting out and riding and capturing, great photos and great video content while we're out there. Because let's be honest, a lot of us like to share our adventures. I think that's 10-20% of the fun or the adventure. So I'm working with somebody on that. I'm working with somebody who is just getting into off-road and dual sport riding and getting their perspective. So we've got a lot of options. So we'll see what's on tap for next week. But until then, you guys take it easy, be safe out there, and we'll catch up with you next week. Thanks for listening.